The first news I would like to highlight is that Brazil has its own micro-strategy now with Melius adopting Bitcoin as a Treasury reserve asset.
The interesting thing to note here is the performance of Melius, right? I mean, if Tesla's acquiring Bitcoin, if MicroStrategy is acquiring Bitcoin, some of the biggest companies in the world are holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets, then why shouldn't the other companies that operate across Latin America do the same?
That the idea is to expand the offer of tokenized assets in the country. The people can now invest in these tokenized assets that companies want to release through Foxbit, and this creates a more open option of investment assets.
All right. Welcome everybody to another episode of Frontera. So today we have a little bit of a different show with us. So LatAm is currently in New York at Solana Accelerate. So we've got Julian, aka Joker, who is our researcher at Frontera, who is going to be joining us for today's show. So Julian, really happy to have you here, man. How are you doing?
No, it's a pleasure. I'm doing great. Bitcoin hit an all-time high yesterday, so it's a good week. It's a good day, and I'm excited to do my debut here at Frontera.
Yeah, man. No, you've been an instrumental part of I think uncovering, and more than uncovering, actually analyzing a lot of the key insights on crypto trends in Latin America. So it's been really great to get those weekly updates from you on what's going on, and I actually think you probably are way more cued in on the in-depth nuances of a lot of the research pieces we're pumping out. So cool, man. So why don't we, and by the way, happy Bitcoin all-time high day as well. So that's a really big, exciting announcement. And I think generally a lot of energy coming into the crypto ecosystem. So Joker, why don't we run through all of the news for this week?
The first news I would like to highlight is that Brazil has its own micro-strategy now with Melius adopting Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset, in which they just last week, the 15th of May, they bought 320 Bitcoin now on a total, and their new buy was 270 for $28 million. And this marks the first Brazilian company that adopts Bitcoin as a treasury asset. And I think we're going to see this trend happen more and more in emerging markets as countries try to escape the dollar and, survive. What do you think about this, Rush?
I mean, so I think the interesting thing to note here is the performance of Meliuz, right? So we first reported when they just had launched their performance since they announced that they were going to be essentially becoming the MicroStrategy of Brazil. If you go to the year-to-date graph, you'll see, okay, up and to the right. So the stock was sort of like dwindling along. And then Melius says, hey, actually, we want to take a really strategic bet here on essentially enabling people to have access to our Bitcoin holdings by holding our stock that trades on the B3, which is the Brazilian stock exchange. And the stock has performed incredibly well. We're seeing a little bit of a pullback here, but this is only natural to see a 3x over the course of about 2 months is usually pretty unheard of, particularly in some Latin American markets. So I think this is really exciting and just another part of, I think, the thesis behind where a lot of emerging market companies are going to try to push the boundaries and perhaps have a little bit more leniency on the regulatory front, especially in very pro-crypto, pro-regulation environments like Brazil.
Yeah, and we see the same with Melius, and the same happened this week with Mercado Libre, that they already had a Bitcoin buy in 2021, but they bought 150 Bitcoins right now last week also. And what's the important thing here, or something that I'd like to note, is that they didn't publicly announce this buy. They just disclosed it through their SEC filing, and they bought 157 Bitcoin, and they kept it as a secret because you can see the difference that Melius announced it and pumped their stock only because they bought Bitcoin, and fundamentally nothing changed as a business. But now Mercado Libre just wants the Bitcoin as an asset to improve their treasury here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because Melius has been all over my Twitter timeline, whereas Mercado Libre, you would have no idea unless you went into their SEC filings, right? And read, oh, actually they acquired some Bitcoin. So I think that the fascinating piece here is essentially, there are two different reasons why a company might choose to do this. One, as you say, is to be valued because of this speculative nature, right, around Bitcoin, and another one is just to safeguard your assets, right? It is fundamentally like the best performing asset class that has existed this entire decade. So it makes sense for big corporates to essentially be taking those moves there, and looking forward to seeing more and more companies from the region come to save and acquire digital assets, right? I think this is what we're all here for fundamentally.
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen a lot more in these coming years because it's just basic pattern recognition. As of right now, like you look at the US and you see the institutions buying Bitcoin and the governments wanting to buy Bitcoin. And then you as a company have to think, if they're doing it, why would I not want to do it? If the purpose of a company is surviving and, well, helping the customers. And for that, you have to have a solid financial base at the start.
Exactly. I mean, if Tesla's acquiring Bitcoin, if MicroStrategy is acquiring Bitcoin, some of the biggest companies in the world are holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets, then why shouldn't the other companies that operate across Latin America do the same, right? So I think this is great news, and just generally puts some buy pressure behind the asset class. So, overall bullish. What do we got next on the docket?
It's the CMB of Brazil authorized Foxbit to operate a crowdfunding operation through the tokenization of assets in Brazil. And what this basically means is that they allowed Foxbit to tokenize crowdfunding and letting people, companies, small companies mostly, expand their offer through tokenized assets. And people can invest in these assets in a regulated way that allows innovation to happen in the country at a more sophisticated level.
So what do you think is enabling this? And why would Foxbit care to go through the Comisión de Bolsa y Valores in Brazil to unlock this? And like what financial innovations do you think this brings to the Brazilian market?
First of all, they have to go to the CMB to be regulated and to avoid any legal problems that might arise. And here, what they say is that the idea is to expand the offer of tokenized assets in the country. The people can now invest in these tokenized assets that companies want to release through Foxbit. And this creates a more open option of investment assets. And that's basically it. So people can add more risk to their portfolios and to their investments as a whole.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, one of those pieces of news that right now is very subtle, but I do feel that this tokenization piece, and particularly in Brazil, is just going to allow us to further see the regulatory environment compound and bring a lot more financial innovation. It almost feels like, I was just having lunch with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about how Brazil is a market that just sells into the world, right? It rarely buys, and it can afford to do that because it has created this very insular, very well-oiled economic machine. China is a very similar country. In the early 2000s, we went through a big commodity boom because China was going through this massive process of industrialization. But now that it's achieved basically this homeostasis, it can now begin pumping out a lot of innovation, right? And so I think Brazil is in a very similar place across Latin America. They went through massive economic development and are now essentially able to unlock and bring a lot of economic and financial innovation to the region. So I think if anything is we probably as a team need to be spending more time down there, connecting with the key folks over there and really moving that forward. So this is super exciting, man. Why don't we move on to what we got next?
Well, I think you're going to like this one.
This is fun.
The Argentine Football Federation just closed a deal with Win Investments, and they're launching a pioneer product that allows you to tokenize the formative rights of football players, young football players mostly, and this allows any person to fund a football player's career. And while if they're good, you reap the rewards. So I think this is a really interesting take on tokenization and something I had not seen before, but it's a real use case in the real world. So I like it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fun. Like this is disintermediating both who gets access to football players, right? Which is a massive business, right? There's a very famous club in Ecuador that essentially they started one of the elite football schools in Latin America, and their entire business model is we're going to take young kids and who have an incredible talent, and we're going to train them, and then we're going to sell them. And not only are we going to sell them because they sell them onto Premier League teams and so forth, we're going to put a clause that says there is a resale percentage that we take on the future transaction, right? And so, but the problem is, the people who started this are some of the wealthiest people in Ecuador, right? Because they have access to the capital. Starting a football academy is no easy task. Starting a great football academy that, you can then sell players onto the Premier League too, for example, is practically impossible. So it just allows more people to be able to do these kinds of experiments and for there to be more expression of free markets in a way where more people have access to them as well. So I mean, look, I'm not even surprised that, of course, it's the Argentine Football Association, right? Because the Argentines, similar to Brazil, I think are very advanced when it comes to building more so. I think like Argentines in particular are infamous for building great things. So yeah, I know the Win Investments team too. So no, this is really, really awesome.
Well, I think that what's best about this is not only that as an individual, you can fund a football player's career. And if they sell to Manchester City for 20 million, well, you get a little bit of that. But in Latin America, well, I'm from Mexico and I've seen how the Mexico football system works. And there's a lot of good players and a lot of good kids that don't have the opportunities to develop correctly and get to the next level because of financial issues and because of the corruption in the football institutions here in the country. And well, this is a good start to allow good players to develop and to start their careers, even if they don't have the funding.
Totally, man. Yeah, this is what's so exciting is we can now give these young kids basically the opportunity to say, hey, maybe previously you had to rely on a really rich patron for you to go on and fund yourself with your career. But now it's, Joker and Kush in Guatemala and Mexico can fund like an Argentine player's career and have upside in that career as well and be invested in their progress and so on and so forth. So no, this is awesome and really excited to see this happening.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on this here at Frontera. So let's go on to the next news. That for Bitso, the push wasn't enough. They just released a new hackathon for MXMB, their Mexican stablecoin. And it's a 4-week sprint to create the next generation of payment and DeFi solutions with MXMB, the stablecoin they just released, and also sponsored by Bitso Business. And well, it's basically this, a hackathon with 3 different categories, which is payments with MXMB in DeFi, and an OpenBuild on Arbitrum, since MXMB is mostly released on Arbitrum. And you can see the prices for the different categories here. And well, this is just another try by Bitso to foster innovation in the country. And I think this is really, really needed since MXMB had a slow start. And this just allows more people to build on MXMB. And then they have these more solutions available for the public. And well, that just creates a growth flywheel, and which will be very positive for the coin.
Totally, man. Yeah, I mean, just the other day I was looking at the stats, right? And MXMB definitely has a lot more volume currently flowing through it compared to MXMB. I think this makes a lot of sense. Honestly, it seems that Bitso has been making some really strategic moves lately, right? So they wound down their card, they launched the push, they're doing this hackathon, right? It seems that there's this, and we've talked about the innovator's dilemma, right? Where when one becomes the large whale, you get very comfortable and you essentially are no longer forced to do these kinds of initiatives. So I think, there's the Stablecoin conference, which we're also partners for as well. Shout out there. Frontera 10 is our code, and you can use that to get a 10% discount. Let's go. But I think that, again, it's like all of this is, I can't think of a single other company in Latin America. So whether that is Lemon or Bello or Ripio, right, that is pushing this much at the boundaries, Mercado Bitcoin, when it comes to crypto. So I think this is really exciting. And what do you think of these different categories they have, Joker? So we've got payments, MXMB and DeFi, and then OpenBuild. I really like the OpenBuild tracks, by the way. I think they're always just like a very fun, a space to experiment. But yeah, curious to get your takes on the categories that we're seeing here.
I also like the categories, and I think those 3 cover every aspect completely. Well, you got the OpenBuild, which allows anyone to build anything, and they're probably going to be more startups competing in that category, even though the prices are a bit smaller, because well, if you have an open hackathon fostering innovation that allows you to build anything you want, well, you enter. And there are probably more people with MVPs in that category, and we'll see a lot of cool things come from there.
Totally.
And well, the other 2 are very, very much needed for MXMB, since we've seen that the slow release, and it's basically very much centralized right now, and it does need an integration with DeFi to see it develop a bit more and to continue growing the ecosystem.
Totally, man. Yeah, and I think the bounties are actually really generous, right? So
yeah,
first place is $7,500 plus access to the stablecoin conference, and then mentorship sessions, right? I mean, so there's different ways of like structuring hackathons, right? But I think having a really, really big incentive for the first place just means you're going to attract a lot of amazing builders, basically, right? So this is awesome. And again, props to Bitso, man. I think they're for them really like pushing the boundaries here. Like I said, I really can't think of any other company in Latin America that is doing as much when it comes to thinking, okay, how do we innovate and not get comfortable? So even the fact that they launched MXMB, right? There are very few other, we talked about Melius stablecoin, for example, but there are very few other platforms that are thinking about this as well. So maybe we'll see a Bitso chain at some point as well. Like clearly the like business model is there, but Ripio has LatChain that's on ZK Sync. That's by the way, deserves a very notable shout out because I do think that like launching a whole freaking chain is a venture of its own. So cool, man. No, this is great. And again, shout out to our friends at the Bitso team. I know they're loyal listeners of Frontera.
Yeah, well, the last news we have for this week is that Binance grew 40% year over year in their user base and participation, and that they doubled their transaction volume during last year. And I think this is huge for Mexico because it's the biggest crypto app in the country to double their trading volume in 1 year, and Bitcoin just hit 111K. And if the industry continues to grow as a whole, we'll see crazy numbers in the coming years. What's your take on this, Kush?
Yeah, man. So I was at a Binance event last week, and growing your user base by 40% when it is already on the order of millions is no easy feat, right? I mean, you know, if any company manages to grow their user base to that magnitude, it's very commendable. What I think is interesting in this article, they essentially talk about the fact that trading pairs between MXN and USDT seem to have been driving a lot of that volume and growth in users. I recently, in fact, whilst I was at this event, I met this guy who I started talking to, and I asked him why he was there, and he said, "Oh, you know, I do a lot with the world." And this is fascinating when we think about like what are key drivers. And so he said that whenever he onboards someone into World, so he gets a referral fee of 200 pesos, so $10. And then when and he's referred like hundreds of people, right? So he's made thousands of dollars. And what I think is fascinating about this is he's not into crypto. He just uses Binance, and he just uses Binance. Essentially, what then he does is he sells batteries, if I'm not mistaken, like home batteries for home, not in a commercial capacity, just a guy who is a battery merchant. And his strategy is, hey, onboard onto World, and then use that World to buy my batteries. And then he deposits all that into Binance. And I thought that was such a fascinating economic flow that is just totally so out of the future, right? Is like, hey, scan your iris, and in exchange, I'll give you like a battery pack or something like that. And then I off ramp it off of Binance. So I think Binance is just, and in Mexico obviously has dominant market share, not by, you know, Bitso is close behind, but Binance does have a very, very strong and a presence in the region, which is pretty interesting. I'm curious, like with the people that you know, Joker, you know, how many people use Binance versus how many people use other crypto apps?
I did check before recording what was ranking in the finance apps here in Mexico, and Bitso is at 57 and Binance is at 47. So in rankings, it's not much of a difference. For my friends here in the country, most crypto natives use Binance, and retail users that are just entering crypto use Bitso. So we can see this difference because of Bitso's easy UI and UX, and their onboarding flow is almost close to perfect, and it's very easy and very intuitive to buy crypto through Bitso as your first time. And then we see the more degen users use Binance because of the tools that the platform allows, and because of the trading, and well, because they also want leverage, I suppose. So they want that 50x Binance allows. So I see it as a very big difference between retail and more developed market participants.
Yeah, I totally, I mean, at this Binance event, the buy was definitely traders. It was not newbie retail or developers. It was really focused on traders. And I mean, to the extent that at a social gathering, people had their screens up, they're doing technical analysis, you know, it was very, very trader focused. That has never fully been a world that I've immersed myself in, right? I've played around with a little bit of trading. I've played around with leverage. I'm more of just like buy and hold things that I have high conviction in, and you know, if there are certain reasons to have to shift the portfolio around, then do so. But it isn't I you know, I think we've all just for fun maybe just gone onto like the 1 minute charts and just played around with, oh, I wonder what this completely dubious speculation will lead to, right? And that's always like a quite a fun game to play. But no, this is exciting, and congrats to Binance, man. I mean, honestly, it's just anywhere in Latin America, they're absolutely crushing it.
Yeah, well, I have delved into leverage and trading a bit more. I come from the meme coin trenches and the NFT mania and the leverage trading. So I do get, and I do mostly use Binance for trading when it's on a centralized exchange. And well, yeah, I think if it grew 40% year over year last year, it's gonna grow 40 again. And if we continue seeing Bitcoin rise, it's gonna go to the top 10 in the Mexico finance app chart. And maybe
that's always, by the way,
one.
usually a really good sign that we're perhaps nearing the top. Whenever you see like Coinbase and all these big crypto apps like #1 on the App Store, you're like, right, I should be a little bit concerned now.
Yeah, I do have seen over crypto Twitter that they use the Coinbase ranking as a top indicator, and well, maybe we see that here for Mexico with Binance.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe for some reason or another, we've got a leading indicator on app downloads and correlation to the market. So no, man, this is great. Cool, Joker. Well, man, this is again really happy to have you on. Filling in for Ab. And you know, for everyone that I know really loves and appreciates our research, and Joker is the driving force behind that. So make sure you give him a shout out. Where can people find you, by the way, on X?
You can find me as Joker XBT on X with a hero instead of the O, and also to the same matter in Telegram. And yeah, send me a message if you want to talk or have any questions.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for all the incredible research work you do. You can find me at 0xkush, and you can find us at Frontera_EC on Twitter, or maybe it's all one. I'm not sure. What is it, Joker?
It's all one.
All one. There you go.
Yeah.
It's all one. So Frontera EC on Twitter. You can find us there and check out the newsletter. Make sure you sign up for the Stablecoin conference with the discount code Frontera10. And hope you all have a wonderful week. Take care, everybody. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.